I could have just took one more step.
Yep.
And I didn't. And I walked out and I got in my car and I was so angry with myself. I was yelling and screaming, hitting the steering wheel. And I had a good old come to reality with myself. Like, look, if you're going to be nice all the time, you're not going to feed your family. You're going to go broke.
Hello and welcome. This is Brian Delaney with Unlock Potential, where we get together with top experts in their field who have simple, profound advice to help you and I live better lives, to be able to be more fit to serve the people around us and answer that question, the question that nags within all of us. How good can I be and how great can I make it for people around me? All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Unlock Potential. I am joined by my good friend, salesman extraordinaire and leadership coach, Kevin Purdy. Come listen in, lean in, and dig in with us as we explore how we can unlock potential. Awesome. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it, man.
You bet, Brian. Nice to be here.
Yeah. Just coming off of a couple of weeks ago, getting to enjoy hanging out at your daughter's wedding. And what an epic party! What a great time we got to have. So
that's great to hear.
Yeah, that was so much fun. When I saw the fireworks go off, I knew there was another level.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Yeah,
not backyard fireworks.
No,
we're talking boom, boom.
We're talking Purdy level fireworks. There's a new level, right?
Yeah, no M80 in the trash.
Oh no. We're not talking about what we used to do. We're talking about real stuff. Yeah. That was incredible. I was like, everybody was looking at your daughter and son-in-law and like celebrating them as they came out, and then behind us. And I was like, what? And so I'm sure you guys planned it that way, but that was so cool and just so great to enjoy hanging out and watching that incredible day for your family. That was awesome.
Thanks, Brian. It was a pleasure having you there.
Yep.
And Tori celebrating.
Yeah, absolutely. We usually try to get one big lesson out on the front end for those people who kind of tune in just for the first 2 to 5 minutes of it. And with you, I really wanted to just dig in because I see that you have an exceptional strength around celebrating people, around just acknowledging what their strengths are, how those can help them, and just being an overall incredible encourager. Can you talk a little bit about the role that plays in your leadership and in your life?
Sure. With positive leadership, I was really influenced a lot by, the books I read, people I listened to, John Gordon being one of them, who wrote The Energy Bus and Positive Leadership. And then just reflecting on what really motivated me throughout my life. And it was always encouragement as opposed to correction a lot of times. Not to say I'm not good at listening and getting corrected, but I noticed I accelerated faster with encouragement. And so, being that type of person that when you're working and influencing people, which is true leadership, it's walking away from that conversation. Are you walking away motivated to keep going? Or are you walking away disappointed and frustrated with maybe the messenger and not necessarily the message?
Yep.
So it's kind of how you deliver that message is in a nice present with a bow on it, and how you're giving it to the person as opposed to, something that might be sitting on the shelf for a long time that smells.
Yeah. So I find that one of the challenges for me in doing that is how to provide encouragement when it's not all good. Like when it's not all sunshine and rainbows and like everything's not all good, because especially as a developing leader, I was in a position where I was like, well, I want them to like see and get the good stuff, but I don't want to gloss over this stuff that's causing them a lot of problems, and which led me to, especially early on, having a lot more critical conversations where they would leave feeling worse, I would leave feeling worse, and there wouldn't be a good outcome. So how do you, when everything's not all good, which is a lot of times why we're coaching in the first place, how do you kind of stay out of that trap of focusing on the negative and focusing on those things that are just glaring sometimes as somebody's work they're not doing or somehow that they're not showing up?
Yeah, I think a lot of times you're looking when there's an issue, negativity, whatever it might be. I think a lot of times you're focusing on that. And, since this podcast, you mentioned about sales could be the same thing. You're constantly profiling, you're prejudging, and it could be always a lot of times unpleasant situations. People aren't excited to see you. They're frustrated. They're embarrassed. And so your job has to be like, what's the end result? In sales, my end result is I want to provide a service, a solution, and I want you to walk away from it happy, and I want to walk away happy. So a lot of times in leadership, there's an issue, but at the end of the day, I need to walk away feeling good about it. Is it easy to do? No.
Yeah.
But my personality is, I find myself saying a lot of times, "You having fun? We having fun?"
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I was raised as a only child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, who's my tribe? Who's my friends?
Yeah.
If I'm a jerk today, can I call you up tomorrow, Brian? Or the old school, go knock on your door and say, "Hey, do you want to come out and ride bikes?"
Yeah.
So it's kind of working with people and understanding that human nature. And just from my experiences having bosses and mentors, it's how did I respond? Who are the ones that influenced me? And it was always those guys that could, recognize who I was, understand the problem,
Yep.
Appreciate me, use that correction, that influence. And then when I walked out, I felt okay about it. Like I knew that person was for me, not necessarily against me.
Yeah, I love that whole idea because it's like sometimes we don't realize what it's like to be on the other side of us. We just have an agenda. And I think that's a big mistake that I've made as a leader and a lot of leaders make. It's like what the message is the most important. I need to send the exact message. It's the right words. It's all this stuff. And I love how you correlated that to sales. It's like, listen, this, whether it's a good environment or a bad environment, I'm going to create the environment.
Absolutely.
I'm going to own that. And so, yeah, what do you do to make sure that you're in that headspace, especially when you need to be productive? Like when you were out there struggling at first as a sales guy, just getting into, I think your first sales gig might've been insurance and then it was home improvement.
Right.
Like when you were early days home improvement sales and you had to walk into some of those places, and you and I have both walked into really high end places and really not high end places.
Sure.
How did you keep that mindset of, I'm going to create the environment, I don't need to be subject to it?
I was always curious of who was behind the door, who is that person? And so I was always looking to find out who you were, kind of a little bit of your background. Doesn't have to be a long, drawn out conversation, but I was always curious. Mm-hmm. And so when I'd go into people's houses that were big and successful, I was excited to kind of find out who they were, what they did, how they got there. And same on the other side where people maybe weren't as less fortunate. Really get into who the person is as opposed to the trappings that might be around them or not around them.
Yeah.
So I felt like because I'm the sales guy, I'm in control. Mm. So, and it's almost like a puzzle. It's like a, obstacle course that how I manage who I am in the situation is going to determine the outcome. Yep. And so if it was the same obstacle every day in sales or in life, I'd be bored.
Yep.
And a lot of salespeople, I find myself, it's nothing new. It's like, I always talk about the tough obstacles, that grumpy homeowner, the smelly homeowner, the, very, very cocky homeowner, the not willing homeowner. And then when I can kind of overcome those obstacles, break them down, make a connection, build a friend, and then help them, and they're walking away. Those are the big ones. Those are the ones you remember.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the people that just go along with you. And you can look at sales as, well, then you're a true salesperson, right? Because you're knocking down the objections as you go. You don't always remember the laydowns.
That's right. Yeah. The easy ones. We want the easy ones at first, right? Because we want to have that evidence for confidence, and we want to be in that spot. But you're exactly right. I mean, you remember the situations that you created, not the ones that happened to you. And
all you need is like one or two.
Yeah.
Where you had that tough sale, that tough obstacle, and it could be in leadership as well.
Yep.
Where that's strong, like you got that pit in your stomach, like, how am I going to talk to this person about this? And then all of a sudden it works out marvelously.
Yeah.
You use that experience, and it's, old school, you put it in the file drawer, and you're like, oh, when I dealt with Brian, oh man. But at the end, it all worked out great.
Yeah.
So then that builds the confidence. So that now all of a sudden I found myself going into leadership situations, sales situations, like, oh, this could be a Delaney, and I'd name them like, oh, this is a Delaney situation.
Yeah.
I won in that before, I can do it with this person.
For you, kind of growing up, talk about your situation growing up, where you grew up, how you grew up, that led you to be this person who, instead of like confident in the obstacles, you became curious about what's possible.
Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York, Rochester, outside Rochester, New York, single child or only child to two parents or school teachers. Education was really important in my house, my parents. And the neighborhood I grew up in had a ton of boys. So I was really fortunate there. We lived out in the country and we played outside all the time. We had dirt bikes and we had a lot of unsupervised play. A lot of times in the dirt sand pot, like in the dirt pit, in the woods, and it was awesome. I loved it. So my upbringing there was, I heard all the time, my mom, dinner conversations, how was school today? And I enjoyed school more from the social aspects of it as opposed to the learning.
Yeah.
I mean, old school Kevin Purdy here, where my mom had flashcards, and I was so annoyed, like, Andy, one of my best friends down the street, his mom, she's not a school teacher. She doesn't have flashcards. Why at 7:30 on a Tuesday night are you giving me a pop quiz with math flashcards? Andy's not doing it. And so I got this kind of like little chip on my shoulder. Like, I don't want to do this. This is not fair.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time she handed me, not my character, but this is Kevin Purdy back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, here's these flashcards. I want you to learn these new, your 9 times tables or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, all right. And so I go in my room, which is like prison at this point. I'm like, oh, great. 9 times 6. Oh, what is it? Is it 52? Oh, 54.
Yeah.
And I just want to get through the flashcards so that I could like do something non-education.
Yeah.
So I took my little, number 2 pencil. And very lately, so when mom handed me the flashcard, I had a little 54 there, right? So I'm looking further like, all right, mom, I'm going to go back in. Come out 5 minutes later, like, okay, you ready, Kevin? Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 times 6. I look at 54, good. And so it goes back to that encouragement. I'm like, oh, that feels so good.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 times 3, 27. Yes. And I'm like, wow, you're amazing. Thanks. And I just, it's womp womp. I'm done. Exactly. 1 down, 4 up, baby. Let's go.
I love it.
So yeah, the whole environment. I just knew I wasn't that kid in school. Like, oh man, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't really enjoy studying.
Yeah.
And my mindset was, I was very open. So I wanted to try new things. I wanted to experience it. I love music. Kiss, Van Halen. I wanted to play guitar like Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
So mom was like, well, okay, look, wow, Kevin's showing interest. Great. Gets me a music class to learn to play guitar. And second lesson, I'm like, strum, string. I'm like, this stinks, man. How come I'm not playing like
Yeah.
So I really had that kind of closed mindset.
Yep.
And, threw it in the corner.
Yeah.
And went back to something that was easier for me to do. It was like doing a wheelie on my bike.
Yeah. Yep.
But the neighborhood of the boys I grew up around, pretty much about 85% of those families were business owners.
Really?
My friend Scott up the street, his dad was, he repaired washer and dryer. So he's like appliance repairman.
Yeah.
My friends, boys, I grew up, 4 brothers, a big Italian family. They had a construction business, home improvements. My other friend, they had and they're all big families, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, they're five kids. They had a technology oil fluid company.
Yeah.
And so I saw all these families that, you know, were in business, that had freedom. And my parents, you know, I had a nice lifestyle, but they were going to their jobs. So that's when I first started looking at business. Like my friends down the street, the 4 brothers there, they race motocross. So, you know, every year they had brand new dirt bikes.
Yeah.
They had a big motor. We had a motorhome. My parents were campers. You know, my wife and I are not campers.
Yeah.
We like to camp, but the whole deal.
Yeah.
And they had a huge motorhome. They go to races, and it was all about money.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to go from racing BMX to racing stock cars.
Oh, man.
I was like, I want to give Kel Yarbrough a shot. You know, I'll rub front fenders with Dale Earnhardt. Come on, Ed, let's go. Kind of like that open mindset. And my dad's like, look, man, I'm not a tool and die maker like your friends are. I don't have the resources and the capital. And right there, I was like, oh man, you know, you know, they're doing it.
Yeah.
Come on, Dad.
Yeah.
So
what was that like for you when you saw that? Because I went through a similar experience, you know, I remember growing up in, you know, the first neighborhood, this actually second neighborhood we lived in. It was all people who were just kind of around our economic status. And then we kind of moved up. And it was just right when things started to get good for my family because they had hit a new level and had done some new things. And now we're in a neighborhood with people who were further ahead and starting to look at you're starting to look at their stuff. You're starting to look at your own stuff and being like, what's going on here? Like, they always have the flashy new car. And mom's got a great car, but she buys the same car every time. Like, my parents were frugal and all of that kind of stuff. So what was that like for you? And how do you feel like that impacted you?
You know, one of the shows I used to love watching when I was a kid was Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Oh yeah,
Robin Leach, and that was probably one of my favorite shows. And I'd just get absorbed in watching that program, and I did a lot of daydreaming. You know, when you're a C student, like that window is your best friend. You know, just staring out the window, like, oh man, it's a nice day. Like, you know.
I think we just hit a historic moment on the podcast. I think we just unlocked a bit of truth that has never been talked about before. It's like, why are C students CEOs? And it's because they have the time to daydream and use their imagination.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So just daydreaming about, wow, this would be awesome. You know, this would be so cool. I could, you know, riding dirt bikes and bikes. You know, that was one thing. I wanted to race motocross. My mom was like, there's no way you're racing motocross. Ironically, my mom would not let me play Pop Warner football. I wanted to play Pop Warner football. And so when I first started to realize I had some sales skills was I sold my parents on a dirt bike. Yeah. And it was almost like a little FOMO, like, listen, Mom, Dad, here I am. 9 years old at the dinner table. All my friends are riding their dirt bikes. I can't pedal my bike as fast as their dirt bikes. I got to get a dirt bike. Yeah, I'm being left out. Yeah. And so that fear lost them, and I got a dirt bike. Yeah. And I wanted to race motocross. That was the next step. Yeah. And my mom's like, "There's no way you're racing motocross." And I'm like, "You won't let me play football, but you have a dirt bike." Yeah. So I couldn't tackle Johnny with a helmet on with, you know, coach blowing the whistle, but we had killer full contact tackle football games right up in the empty lot.
Oh, you know? Oh, yeah.
Come home and, you know, all banged up.
Didn't know what a concussion was.
Shake it off.
The good news was I never got a concussion until I knew what one was. Right. And then I was like, oh, yeah, there might have been a few in my history. Yeah.
So I grew up hearing a lot of no. You know, no, you're not going to race. And, you know, I get it. Mm-hmm. No, you're not going to race motocross. No, you're not going to race, you know, or tackle Johnny with a helmet on. Yep. So it's kind of, but I always was, you know, going back to daydreaming and visualizing like, wow, what could life be like? You know, how would I be doing if I had a faster dirt bike? How would life look for me if I could do the things that, you know, the back of my brain's telling me, go for it. You can do that. And that's what I loved about, extreme sports. I grew up playing, I was exposed to team sports.
Yep.
Really wanted to play football, wasn't allowed to. I played soccer. I'm like, I don't want to be running around chasing this ball. Like, no offense to the most popular sport in the world, but and then baseball was very slow and boring. So I was attracted to individual sports. Racing, BMX was really, did that a lot all across the country. My dad in the summertime, and downhill skiing.
Yeah.
Racing downhill skiing was a lot of fun to me. And then my parents were golfers in tennis.
Okay.
So I played tennis and golf. So
Gotcha. So going from that competitive background, what are some things that you feel like have stayed with you throughout your life? Just like being in that, and maybe not even so much competitive, but growing up skiing, growing up riding dirt bikes, racing BMX. What do you still have with you that are things that you brought along from that?
it's all mindset. It's all mindset where, you have to get into your head to be prepared to do what you're going to do. Like, back in the day, I used to watch Wide World of Sports, and they used to have downhill skiing, and I had some heroes like Bill Johnson, who won the gold medal in 1984. And I watched these skiers before their race, and the camera crew would come over and say, okay, here's Bill Johnson over here. And they'd leave him alone, and you look at him, and he'd be sitting there, and he'd be going like this. He's got his eyes closed, and I'm like, oh. And they're talking on TV like he's right now practicing he's skiing right now in his head. And I saw that. I'm like, well, I'm going to do that this weekend in Swain. And so I found myself taking time out before the event to get my mind right. And so what I love doing in BMX is I'd take my helmet off and I'd bury my head in it upside down.
Yeah.
And I'd be sitting there in a place what they call staging. You're with your group you're going to race against before the race.
Okay.
And I just go to that quiet place and I would mentally race the race before. And I'd paint the outcome that I wanted, which is first place. And so providing that mental toughness, because I didn't have the brothers like all my friends around me.
Yep.
To like kind of feel like I had that bodyguard. So I had to be my own individual bodyguard and be mentally prepared to do that. And the thing I'll take away from that whole experience is growing up is I was also influenced by older kids. My friends, my age group were kind of the last ones.
Okay.
And so I was hanging out a lot with, people that were 2, 3, 4 years older than me, which ironically nowadays, having 4 children, my kids will always say, and I don't know if you find this with Creed, it's like, Dad, that kid's a junior. I'm only a sophomore. What? Or that kid's a ninth grader. I'm a 10th grader.
That's right. And
I was like,
Green does say that a lot.
Back when we grew up, it's like, dude, you're a boy. You like dirt bikes. I don't care if you're 2 years older than me. Let's go. So,
Yep.
So when you grow up with the older boys, like the book Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell writes a great, whole chapter on NHL hockey players and kind of their bursts and how they perform. It's a lot of times older. You get more reps, attention, all that. And so when you're hanging out with older kids, there was some situations growing up a lot where, we're going to try out this new jump.
Yeah.
And it's big and you go down the hill and hit it and, you're scared.
Oh, yeah.
But Tony does it.
Yep.
And you're like, wow, if Tony did it, we all got to do it.
That's right.
So then it's kind of, and stitches and all that, because you can't do it as well as Tony. But
turns out if Tony can do it, doesn't necessarily mean, but it means I'm going to try.
Exactly.
Yep.
So it's kind of bringing that same visualization, that understanding the fear, but doing it anyways. I mean, we hear it all the time, but those simple little steps can really, help you get to the outcome what you're looking for, which is either to successfully land a jump, successfully ask the girl out, successfully close the sale.
Yeah. And I think that's, Stephen, when I first read that in 7 Habits, I mean, I saw it just like you did. I saw top people in their sport taking that quiet time, not really sure what they're doing. I figured calming themselves down. Turns out visualization is such a big element. It's a skill that almost every top professional athlete has. And Stephen Covey talks about that way. If you visualize it the first time, when you actually do it, it's kind of like the second shot, right? It's that second shot where you already learned from the first shot and you walked it all the way through. And I think a lot of times when people are struggling, I know this was true for me, if I wasn't intentionally visualizing how well it could go, I was unintentionally experiencing and having anxiety about how poorly it could go.
Yeah.
And so it's pick one or the other. One's going to happen either intentionally or unintentionally. And for me, that was an absolute game changer, just like it sounds like it was for you.
Yeah, it's like you really have to, because the more success you have, whether it's in sales or in leadership, then you can get lazy, you can get sloppy, you can get bored.
Oh, yeah.
Like I found myself in home improvement sales, I got extremely bored because being in home improvement sales where your foundation's leaking, I had to go to the basement or in a crawl space. And I was bored with the whole sales process. And so that boredom then led to my interaction with you because I was bored and I wasn't curious and I wasn't excited about it because I felt trapped. Because like, is this my life? I'm just going to be a home improvement salesman? This is it? What happened to Lifestyles and the Rich and Famous? What happened, Kevin, to going for it?
Yeah.
You know, where's that kid?
Yeah.
What are you allowing to hold you back?
So, man, so much to unpack. So much to unpack. So you're going through school. You know, you're spending your time making sure that you do well enough in school to keep your two teacher parents happy. But in the meantime, it's like all about connection for you. You didn't see yourself going on. So talk me through college, no college, and if so,
I went to college. Okay. You know, one of the things my mom eventually by high school, she's like, all right, this kid, you know, he's not a bookworm. Okay? I got to change something up here, you know?
Yep.
And, but she'd always say to me, like, Kevin, you're going to like college better. You're going to like college because you have more freedom. You don't have back-to-back classes. Right. And so, I was approached by the military to go in the military. Yeah. And growing up in the 80s, you know, watching like Full Metal Jacket and Platoon, I was scared I wasn't a big fan of snakes back in the day. You know, I wanted to be that macho tough guy, but I did not want to find myself in the jungle with like, forget about the enemy, but like the wildlife. I just didn't want to have to deal with that.
I'm with you. That's hilarious. I think your genius is you're willing to admit things that most people wouldn't. Right. I don't care. Those guys can have an AK-47 slung around their neck, but have you seen the snakes?
Yeah, exactly.
For me, it would be spiders. I'd be sitting there. Listen, these things, they got 8 legs. They could be anywhere. Right. When there's one, there's a lot of
right. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And I had glasses, too. I mean, I wore contacts because, you know, I didn't want to. There was bullies back in the day. I didn't want to be a Four Eyes. You know, I didn't want to be called that. Yeah. And I didn't want to be that guy in the military. Oh, they issue those black glasses. Like, what happens? Something stupid happens. My glasses fall off. Now I can't see because I got Coke bottles. Yeah. And I can't see the enemy. And I could be sitting on a snake, you know? So I didn't want to go to the military.
Yeah.
And so I went to college. Yeah. I went to a little Division III school in upstate New York, Elmira College. And so I found myself at college, and really my mom was right. I did excel in college. I got way better grades. I think I walked out of there with like over a 3.2 or something. And I played lacrosse because in the area I grew up in, upstate New York, I grew up on the west side of town. They didn't have lacrosse in the schools. On the east side they did. Okay. That's economics there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I started playing lacrosse in college. I played 2 years, tore my ACL, and that was the end of my lacrosse. So that was my first really experience. I did end up playing JV football. I sold my parents on that. That's a whole different story. But so I found myself in college, and my major was marketing because my grandfather, my dad's father, was all about sales. Okay. So I used to spend a lot of time with my grandparents on my dad's side because of location. They were, you know, 5 miles away. I'd have sleepovers there when I was a kid, and my grandfather sold he worked for a beer company and he sold beer and stuff. And he got it early on. And he would tell me stories like how he bought a car and how he negotiated. And he'd say old school stuff like, you need to sharpen your pencil a little bit better and like all this stuff. And I love that story. I loved, like, again, it's the chess match, the obstacle of like how my grandfather, bought the car and kind of that happy medium. He always used to tell me things like, hey, champ, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. You can go really far in life on that. And being he's retired, but he'd go to the brewery and he'd back up his old Delta 88 car. And I'd be sitting in the front seat, no seatbelt on, of course.
Of course, that's how we rolled.
Yeah, and he's like, I was the only grandson, so he called me champ. Muhammad Ali back in the day. And so he goes, hey, champ, hit the button. So pull the glove box down, hit the little yellow button, boom. Yeah. And this huge trunk, you can feel it like almost like an ejector seat. Yeah. And it just swing.
Yeah, it didn't just go up like now. It's just
a little. Like, why don't our cars have that now? It's like you're gonna really like, oh, Delaney's going to get his luggage. Babe, hit the button. Yeah. Hit him in the chin, That'd be a lot. That would be really cool. But you go in there and he goes, boys, and he and the guys at the dock, here's what I want. These cases here and here. And so they put it in the trunk, and you're sitting in the trunk, and I'm like a little boy looking around. I said, the case is going in the back of the trunk. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Yeah. So then we drive away, and this is before Jiffy Lube and Valvoline and everything. We pull in the garage, they're like, I need an oil change. You pull up, and he goes, fellas, I need an oil change. Okay, Mr. Purdy, come on right in. Pull in the Delta 88. We're in the garage. I'm watching all the guys work. They come out. And we get in the car, he backs up and pulls there and stops. Yeah. And he calls the guy over like, hey, Chuck, whatever the guy's name, come here. He goes, boys, you did a great job. Grab yourself a case of beer in the back. Champ, hit the button. Boom. And he, gave him a case of beer. Yeah. For just being nice. And so that type of routine and that positivity and respecting people that are doing the hard stuff. Yeah. Because how you act with the service guy fixing your car is the same way he acted with the owner of the garage. And so good. And you're interacting with the guys working in the garage more than you see the owner. That's right. Because the owner has time, time and that passive income. Carl, who's working on your car, doesn't have that. Yep. And so it was that upbringing, being around in that environment, and how the people responded to my grandfather. Yeah. They loved the guy. Yeah. He's just a beer salesman. Yeah. And it wasn't about free beer. It was about, I respect you. I appreciate you. And so here you go.
That's really interesting, because I was wondering, like, how did you break the mold of having, growing up two teachers? I see the route now. Yeah. Like, it's very clear that your grandfather had a ton of influence on you.
Oh yeah, big time.
Outside, it sounds like one of the most influential people outside your parents.
Of course.
And you just love to watch. It's not like, because sometimes we look at people and we're like, oh, I love what that person does for a living. And it sounds more like you were like, I like how this guy moves. Like, how he moves through life, how he moves through relationships. That just really vibed with you.
And you would say things to me like, champ, you should start a business. Like, you should mow lawns, because every spring, summer, you got to mow lawns. Then you can, plow driveways or whatever. He goes, you should, when you go in college, you should do computers. And computers back then, like, my first experience with computers, my parents bought like this, I don't know, it was pre-Apple. It was like a Commodore or whatever. Yeah. And so I wanted to build this rocket ship, this program. So I literally spent like 4 hours, like, here, C student kid going CC / semicolon. I'm doing all this, which now is code. Yeah. And after 4 hours, hit enter, boom, and you're gonna watch, build your rocket. Yep. And no, incorrect code, syntax error, and all this. Yeah. And I'm like already like, So Graham's saying, you should go into computers. Like, do you know I gave up 4 hours on a sunny Saturday in upstate New York to try to build a stupid rocket to go up like this on a computer screen? No, thanks. I don't want to I don't want to do computers, let alone trying to program. Yeah. But I was always had the sprinkles of those seeds of going into business, of course, because I was influenced by everybody around me. Mm-hmm.
first major job coming out of college?
Oh, well, I saw the movie Wall Street. So here I am,
Nice.
20 years old. Like, what am I going to do? And I saw Bud Fox, and I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Wear a suit because my dad, love him. He's a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Introverted. Mm-hmm. I'm extrovert. My mom's introvert. And, their school teacher friends would be like, Pat Gordy, where'd you get this kid? Is this your kid? And I heard that so much. I finally felt a little bit better when I found like the old photos, like, oh, there's mom holding Kevin in the hospital. Like,
It's real. I wasn't switched.
Exactly. So I saw that movie Wall Street, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. Work in a high rise, wear a suit, because I associated a suit with success.
Yep.
Nowadays in our environment, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It helps sometimes, but it's you can't have that prejudger there effect. Work in a high rise and make tons of money, and also Daryl Hannah in the movie, the fancy blonde haired woman. I was like, oh, I like that. That's fine.
Yeah.
So that's what got me really interested in sales, and I was a junior in college, and so my freshman year, real quick, I waited tables. Well, my first sales job, Brian, I don't know if many people know this, but I went to this is the problem. I went to tri-semester school, which means I got out at the end of May. One of my best buddies, Kyle, went to Penn State. He was home like May 1st. And so all the jobs to have in the summer, a lot of times are taken by the college kids.
Okay.
So in Kyle, ironically, his parents were second generation, this huge landscaping gardening center that I worked for 4 years. And I wanted to be on the landscape crew because those boys, they started early and they finished at 3:30 so I could play softball. Yeah. So it's all about how am I going to position myself to have time to play?
And so early for you.
Yeah. And the landscape crews were all booked up, in May because that's the heavy season.
Yeah.
So I, procrastinator.
Yeah.
So I'm blowing it off. So now all of a sudden it's the end of May and they're like, sorry, Kevin, you can't be on the landscape crews. You can run the register in the garden center. I'm like, oh, that's so boring. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt and the hat, not interested, And so now what am I going to do? My cousin was a general manager of El Torito's Mexican restaurant in Rockville, Maryland. So I zippity-doo down to Northern Virginia and worked for him for a summer. So I was a waiter.
Yeah.
So then again, the same sales principles apply in waiting as in home improvements or any type of sales. So how you treat people, what type of good service. And I got excited by the tips, and then also you don't know. Like that one person you're like very, hey, let me help you. Can I get you more iced tea? You want another margarita?
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, like you're like, oh, this person, man, they're not digging me.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they leave you a fat tip. And you're like, whoa, I can't do that again.
Yeah.
And have that mindset.
Yeah. I can't judge that book by its cover. Yeah.
But for 2 weeks before I took that job, I old school reading into want ads like sell door to door meat. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I'll do that. So I go down to like this warehouse, guy smoking a cigarette, like, welcome boys. This is a great job. You're going to love this summer. So I had a mentor.
Yep.
And he puts me in a white Nissan pickup truck with a white cooler on the back. And like, all right, so how do we do this? And I'm asking him questions like, so how much did you make yesterday? How much you sell? He's like, oh, I made like $200. Wow. Cash. Yeah. It's a long story of it. You have to drive around neighborhoods and essentially accost people. Like,
yeah,
you're beeping the orange, your friend. Hey, how's it going? Hey, got a second real quick. And the pitch was, which I had a hard time with the pitch. It's like, hey, I was just delivering the box of meat here at the fire station and they ordered too much. And so I got a couple extra. And so if you're willing, I'll say the meat.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that doesn't feel right in my gut. I feel dirty with that. So I did that 2 weeks. And so the neighborhoods I was driving in were the rough neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Where after 3 days driving in, areas that country boys should not be driving in.
Yep.
I was like, I'm like, when people start recognizing you, like, oh, hey, you're back here again. Yesterday, you're here at 10:30. I'm like, oh boy. So
it's about to all go wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those sales experience, but I knew I should have been in the game. Like I wanted to be in the game. And then I did my internship I tore my knee up. So I was getting better my sophomore year. And so come junior year, I did my internship for an insurance company, Mutual New York. And, they hired this Ivy League kid, and his last name was Cunningham. And he was a D1 division football player. He was 2 years older than I was. And he was fired up, And so it's time to make cold calls. And so my manager, Mr. Cohen's like, hey, listen, here, I can do this for you. I'll give you leads. You call them. Here's a script. Yeah. You book the appointment. When I go out and run the appointment, if I sell it, I'll give you a little something on the backside.
Nice.
Because I was an intern.
Yep.
And so I wasn't allowed to get paid. So I'm like, great. I'm excited. I'm like, this is competition. So then they bring the Ivy League guy in. I'm not going to say his first name because hunted him down yet.
Yeah.
But he had a lot of attitude. He had that pedigree of I'm Ivy League, I'm Cornell, I'm Big Red, I'm a Division III, didn't letter in sports in college, well, I guess I did. And so it's time to make the phone calls.
Yeah.
He's stiff, he's like, oh, and I'm going through the script, having fun with it. Like, who's going to be on the other line?
Yeah.
Booked 3 appointments. The sales manager goes out and sells them. I get paid. This went on for 2 weeks. I outbooked him on appointments every day. I was super, going back to competition. And Mr. Cunningham, he was fired up. He couldn't handle it. And of course, growing up in our days, I was talking trash.
Yeah.
I was talking did you see on the paper this morning? What? Division III, ACL torn, ex-lacrosse player beats Division I football player in sales. Details at 11. Just
details at
grinding on. Because at the end of the day, I just didn't care.
Yeah.
And so having that freedom just led to more success. And so they offered me the job before I went back to school. During my senior year of college, I got my insurance license right after I graduated.
Yep.
I got my Series 6 and 63, and I started tackling good old parents, friends, and family.
Yep.
Who knew me as a kid that drove too fast through the neighborhood?
Yep.
So why are they going to buy a mutual fund from Kevin Purdy? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I quickly exited that after about a year and a half. I made $6,337 my first year.
For your first year.
And one of those deals was one of my parents. Parents like take the money here a little.
Yep.
And the other one, this little Purdy girl, I sold her a whole life policy, Michelle. That was another one.
So your parents and your wife.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, what you just described is the majority of people who get into insurance in the wrong model. That was almost my story too. It's like, well, who do you know? And I I thought they recruited me because they thought I was special when they thought my contacts were special.
Exactly.
That's what they thought was
exactly.
Man, we get access to all these people that we wouldn't know if we didn't know this guy. Yeah.
And they all know. It's kind of in that culture. It's like you're dead man walking.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah.
And that was the other thing is breaking down that locker room.
Yeah.
Like, how do I find somebody that cares about me, a mentor, somebody I can trust, somebody that can help and coach me? And eventually if you stick it out, and if you have those conversations, you can get in depth, you can find those people.
Oh yeah. So transition from that, how long were you in home improvement sales for?
12 years.
12 years. What are your top 1 to 2 stories from that? Because I know being out in the field, I've had tons of crazy experiences when you run in both good and bad, but you've been in that world for a lot longer. What were some of the best experiences, maybe best worst experiences that you got to have in that world?
Well, I think a lot of times in sales, you're going to have bad experiences. You're going to have good days, bad days.
Yep.
And for me, early on, being in my 20s in sales, is I always wanted you to feel, Brian, let's say you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't sell you, I wanted you to respect me. I wanted you like, turn to your wife and say, Tori, he was a fine young gentleman,
Yeah.
We didn't buy from him, but he's a good guy. He has good character and integrity. And I noticed that attitude held me back a lot.
Yeah.
Because I found myself not going for it because I wanted you at the end of the sale or the end of the appointment to like me.
Yeah.
And so because I wanted you to like me, prevented me from not pushing, but, working along the obstacle a little bit longer to really help you and understanding that challenge. So if I'm walking away with, hey, I want to be a nice guy, being a nice guy is not going to help you.
Yeah. It's not conducive to helping people get what they want that they don't have.
Right.
Like if you can be a nice guy and help people get more things of what that they already have. Like if they already have 4 TVs in their house, you can be a nice guy and sell them a 5th one. Right. It's like, that's not hard. But I think like if somebody's out there and they're taking notes, just like lean into that because that was a huge change in my career.
Yeah.
When I stopped caring whether they like me and started only caring about whether they like themselves at the end of this process. Like, are they going to like the decision that they made because they actually went through it to get what they needed?
Yeah.
And I helped them do that by saying what needed to be said, by building a relationship where there was trust, and then just doing the right thing.
Right.
Just saying the right thing when it needed to, when they were talking crap or saying things that weren't working, because I just looked at it in the very same way. Like if the shoe was on the other foot and my thinking was wrong and somebody who knew more than me, I want them to correct that.
Right.
I need that. Like that would be a big deal for me to have that. And so I think the fact that you hit on that is definitely noteworthy. That's a piece to take away.
Because I found myself, here I am, I react well with pressure.
Yeah.
We've done some crazy things over the years together. And so I feel like when I have pressure, that's all of a sudden my focus, I'm more focused.
Yep.
And so here I am, I have a new baby at home. My wife's, and we made that decision. She was out earning me before in home sales. Like it was important to stay home. She wanted to be home with the kids, and I wanted to be that provider to go out there. So I found myself, some of the bad times was I drove all the way from Northern Virginia to Williamsburg. I had one appointment, and I was there late. I thought I was going to close them. I got really close, and they said no. And I kind of that nice guy, like it's 10:15 in your house, where I could have just took one more step.
Yep.
And I didn't. And I walked out and I got in my car and I was so angry with myself. I was yelling and screaming, hitting the steering wheel. And I had a good old come to reality with myself. Like, look, if you're going to be nice all the time, you're not going to feed your family. You're going to go broke. And so it was that fear that I'm never going to get to that point. And going back to associating it with riding bikes and skiing, like I'm not going to get to the point where it's time to take the jump and I just bail out at the last minute.
Yep. I think that's such a key moment, and nobody can get you through that. You just have to get through it.
Right.
It's like you got to stop being like I saw this as like customer service, and it's like, okay, well, I got to get them to like me, and then they got to like think I did a great job, and I realized when you get to that point of frustration and being broken, there's nothing more motivating than one of your children looking at you.
Right.
Like for me, my son was 3 at the time, my stepdaughter was 10, and just like seeing the look in their eyes, and they didn't know what was going on, but I knew what was going on, and I knew if they knew, it wouldn't be a good situation. But that was the thing. It was like, who do I want to be nice to?
Right.
Like, who do I really want to be good to? Well, I want to be good to my family. So in order to be good to my family, I got to stop being nice to these people. I got to be good to these people.
Right.
Like quit being so likable and actually be effective, and then work on likability.
Exactly.
That's such a key move, I think, in any salesperson's career who actually goes after and gets it.
Because sales it's commission, and I rather be paid for my result than my time. And if you look at like my racing and everything, that's all it is. You know, golf, tennis, the same way. It's like, it's up to you. So that stuff just, for me personally in sales, just carried over.
When it came to that change of objective, you went from when you were sitting in those appointments trying to be that guy who, even if they didn't buy, they were still a nice guy, or you know, when they don't buy, the worst one for me was always like, you did a really good job.
Right, of course.
It's just the one I wanted to like start my car and run out in front of it. I was just like, however, that was the worst experience. Don't tell me that, because you would have bought.
Right.
Like, so what did you find to be that transition? What was your new thought process?
This is when I went for it, and if I didn't close them, help them. When I got in my car, I knew at least I went for it. So I had that. I protected my worthiness. Is like, okay, Kevin, you went for it. You're not going to win them all. That's okay, but you played your best.
Yeah.
And so when your mind's right, when you're not bored, when you're curious, it's time to go to work. And so that mentality is, you know, you can leave all your issues in the glove box.
Yep.
And when you walk into that appointment, it's game time.
Yeah.
It's race time.
Yep. Time to lean in. So in the process of all that, I mean, both you and I were taught when we started with Symmetry years and years ago, it's like, you got to learn how to ask people for stuff. You got to learn how to eat in homes. You got to learn how to do all that. And I was like, man, that was so against everything that I believed. But, you know, I was like, even the same thing, you know, learning that I needed to stack my appointments up, because the whole thing in my head was like, I need to be on time for my appointments. Turned out that thought process was completely wrong. I need to be self-sufficient. I can't ask people for anything. I can't have them because I don't need anything. They need something, and I'm here to help them get it. That was completely wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so like, it got to the point where I'd be like, sitting down with somebody, like eating meals with, chilling. They would be giving me stuff. I'm like in Central North Carolina, asking for something to eat. I get a big box of like Sara Lee goodies with like 4 Mountain Dews. It's 11 o'clock at night. Right. So I'm just making investments in diabetes and but I know, for being in sales for nearly twice as long as I have, I had a construction, so I was doing a little bit of that. But, you know, what were some of those highlights for you after you had that breakthrough of being in that position where I'm going to do what I need to do?
Sure. I mean, in this type of sales environment, whether you're selling nowadays on the phone, on Zoom, or in the home, like pretty much 98% of my sales was in the home, is you have to go with the mindset that you are the away team. So, you know, if you're working at a car dealership, people are coming into you. You know, here at this type of sales, I'm playing on your home turf, but I have to be confident. I have to be prepared. I have to understand my game plan and what is the end result. So I can't let the fans, the distractions in the home slow me down from playing my game. And so that gets down to about control, you know, and it's always about a process, you know, not parking in the driveway, looking at their bumper stickers, looking at how their house is manicured, you know, little things like that. And how you knock on the door. Like friends knock on the door. This is old school. I get it. Instead of, you know, nowadays with the rings and the doorbells, you know, knock on the door. And not apologizing. That was a big one for me in home improvement sales and in our insurance sales. Is I show up at your house, you know, I'm supposed to be there, and they give a time frame between 6 and 8. If I'm showing up at 8:15, you just don't apologize. And the routine in that industry was, your house was suffering. It was leaking. There's a problem. Needed fixed. So people's attitude was different. In financial sales, it was like, you're incompetent. You said you're going to be here at a certain time. You're not. And so how do you quickly diffuse that? And I always like roll my eyes like, man, I am excited to see you, Brian. You're on my last stop of the day. What a day. Let's go. And you take control and walk in. You know? And it's kind of like, old Twisted Sister. We're not going to take it. I'm not going to take it because I got kids to feed. And being, you know, Tommy tough guy at the front door, I'd always tell myself, you're scared.
Yep.
You're scared.
Yep.
And so it's, again, feather in my mindset to be, it's game time right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for me walking into those situations, it's like, you got to choose what kind of outcome you want. If they're in control, this is not going to be a good outcome for you. If you're in control, it's going to be a good outcome for everybody. Mm-hmm. Right. And so being able to walk with that.
And it's the little things leading up to it. So in sales, you don't start like, hey, what's in the fridge? Let me give you something to eat. But it starts like, hey, how about, and I always played, old school Detective Columbo, like, hey, Brian, how about if you sit there and your wife sits here and I sit here? That way you can kind of see what I'm going to show you. Just be better for both of you. You good with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's those little things like, oh, I got to win.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Brian's chair and he's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, hey, go ahead. My wife's just putting the kids to bed. Mm-hmm. I'll go over all this with you. I'll go with it, fill her in.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. Yeah. Because I'm building a rapport with you. I know what's the end result. I got to fix your problem. It's going to cost a lot of money. And you're going to say, all of a sudden, you're going to be nice with me. Kevin, you've been so generous with your time and explanation. Yeah. Appreciate you so much for coming out and doing this. Yeah. You can appreciate that I'm going to have to fill my wife in on all the flux capacitors that are going to have to go in the house here.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we'll call you back and all this. And so, early on, I found myself, I drive away so angry.
Yeah.
Because... Yeah. In home improvement sales, working the evenings.
Yep.
Game time was usually 4 to 10 o'clock at night. That's when they a lot of times try to book my appointments, when both homeowners are home, to be present to make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you think sometimes you can be the hero. Yeah. Like, oh, I like this Brian, he's a good dude. I'm hitting it. We got some good rapport going right now. He's got 4 kids. Fine. Like he's in construction. He's got a nice Carhartt tool belt. Yeah. I'll be able to, he's, and they sell you. Like, oh, look, I'm the boss around here. I make all the decisions.
Yep. Yep. But then they get World's Greatest Husband award comes out. They start to polish it. Mm-hmm. You can completely understand why I would have to talk to my wife about it. It's like, listen, I know you didn't talk to your wife about your bass boat.
Right.
However, which that was $30,000. This is $80 a month. Yeah. We're going to be, but yeah.
And you have to be selfish.
Yeah.
I want to be selfish. Like, look, the rules are, I know your wife needs to be present. She's a homeowner. She's got to be. We're going to bust open the concrete floor in the basement.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to protect my time.
Yeah.
So I found myself thinking, look, if I leave this appointment right now, I can be home in 40 minutes and tuck my kids in at night at 9 o'clock at night, where normally I'm not there.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, those priorities were much more important to me. Mm-hmm. And so having those priorities and those bumpers on the side of me helped me with the sales, because then they realize I'm not desperate.
Yep.
I'm not needy.
Yep.
Well, I value myself, my family. That's important to me.
That's because I really didn't put this together until you just said that. But when people are in that place where they're needy, what's the answer to that? Get some standards. It's hard to get it's hard to get standards when you're desperate, but you need to figure out how to get some standards so you don't have to be desperate for as long.
Right.
And I hear that's exactly what you're saying. It's like, when I had standards, people followed my standards. When I didn't, I just had to follow whatever standards that they had set, which was, hey, do this in the most convenient, comfortable way possible. We're probably not going to buy anything, but you'll waste your time. And the good news is nothing will actually happen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, So you're in home improvement. How many years are you in home improvement before you have your first 6-figure year?
Let's see. That was the following year. So I was in home improvements for 6 months, and then the following year I did over 6 figures.
What did anything specific change in your mindset, around that time, going back to growing up? You're watching all these business owners. You're watching your grandfather. You're watching these kids who have a bit more. You're watching your parents as teachers, and all of that. where when you finally crossed that 100,000 mark, maybe that was arbitrary for you, but where you noticed that something changed in the way that you saw yourself and saw the world?
It felt good to be making money and providing for my family.
Yeah.
Michelle got pregnant with our second child. We were building a house. So having those signs of success starting to show up in my life after being really broke, and that felt good. And then my environment, I was in a sales culture where I was around about 12 other salespeople that were doing well. So it was kind of being in that every day, every week, every month, competing against those fellas was exciting for me. So now all of a sudden I had people to shoot for that were faster than me. So in those early days of making, six figures new in my 20s, being around the influence group of successful people was really what was motivating me. I knew I needed to earn some, as they say a lot of times, seat time. I needed to get some experience, some, just all the things with life, being a parent, owning a house, the ups and downs of all that stuff in sales would help me later on. So I didn't have like that burning desire early on within the first year making six figures. So like, I got to get out of here and go try something myself.
Yeah. You were able to hang in that pocket. And something I hear you saying is it was like less about the six figures and more about hanging out with these other people who were doing it. And so you wanted to be one of the guys. You wanted to be one of the performers, one of the people who got it done.
I was motivated a lot by a leaderboard.
Yeah.
I wanted to be number one on the board. That goes back to, again, my upbringing. It's just, I wanted to beat you.
Yeah. That's good. When it comes to one of the things that I was struck with a couple of weeks ago now, when I was at your daughter and son-in-law's wedding, was I came away with the sense that it means something to be a Purdy. It means something to be for your son-in-law to be a part of that family. It meant something for your daughter. You could just see it in your, like, when did that start? Like, we're talking about the success on the career side, but I got to see, in my mind, a culmination of the work you had done on the family side in that moment. Where did that come from for you, where you were like, it's going to mean something in my family to be one of us, and people like us do things like this, and it's a point of pride in the family to do that. Where did that come? Where did you get that from? And kind of talk about what you've done to instill that into your kids. And I'm sure it's been a group project with you and your wife.
No, absolutely.
Knowing you and Michelle, you both are of the same mind on this. We're gonna make it mean so. Tell us about that.
I've been blessed to find a partner in life early on. I met Michelle when I was 19 at a college Halloween party. And so we didn't have success in the early days. We struggled. And her values as far as wanting to be a mom, she wanted to own a daycare. And we worked a business together. That was important to her. So when I went out and started providing, her focus was the family, and keeping everything good at home so I could go out and be at my best. And that means in those days, not calling me and saying, hey, listen, I'm having a bad day at home. When are you going to be home? She knew she had to protect my mindset in the home without that stuff. Yeah. So, little things like, hey, babe, I'm on my way home. Great. If I don't say I sold anything, she's not going to ask me, did you sell anything? Because the salesperson's going to tell you, hey, babe, I'm on my way home. Good night tonight. Help protect, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, oh, great. That's good to hear. Well, Kyle was in the ER earlier today. What? I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I didn't want to. And so she knew that.
Yeah.
Protect that. So that's kind of the thing that I always rave about my wife from her difference of raising our children compared to my experience was my parents, my mother, and I have a good relationship with my mom.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
you saw that. But it's like my mom talked at me a lot Whereas with Michelle, she talked with the kids a lot. And so it's almost that respect level.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're just a 6-year-old right now, but someday you're going to be older. And I want my children to be present in my life. So I need to be a good leader, a good influencer, a good encourager with them now when they're kids, and not understand that I'm the boss, I know everything. And so it's having that environment of where, you're responsible for your actions. It means something to be part of our family. Family time was really important with vacations.
Yep.
If you look back on my pie chart as far as what we allocated a lot of our money to throughout raising our children, it's time. It's going on vacation. It's the experiences, putting them in on a hotel or in a cruise ship in a 1-bedroom with 4 children in there.
Yeah.
Know that the first 2 days are going to be rocky.
Yeah.
They're going to be at each other. But then amazingly, after 2 days, they get in the flow. They work together and they share stories of, do you know when this happened and that happened? And bringing the family together on Sundays, and sharing those experiences creates a tighter family.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're drawing some connections as well. It's like you went from being a nice guy to a good guy, like when it came to sales, because you got tired of the nice guy result. And I love that, saying what needs to be said in order to help people do what they need to do. And I remember just that, growing up, that priority was on behavior. It was like, you're going to be a well-behaved kid. Like, and because that's a lot of what my parents got. They got that and they gave it, and they were awesome. They were awesome parents. One thing that I learned, and I see with you and Michelle, is you're not trying to raise kids, you're raising adults.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you're explaining things a little bit more than other people would. You're not saying because I said so. It's like, because this is a right thing and here's why it's a right thing. And do you see that? It's more of that leadership and influence model.
She said that a lot. It's like, I want our kids to be happy, productive members of society.
Yeah.
And so that was instilled on them. Like, my experience is, you got to do, what homework do you have? Let me check it. Whereas Michelle's like, your homework is your responsibility.
That's right.
I already did school. It's your responsibility.
Yeah.
And so that kind of setting them up to feel that control.
Yeah.
To feel that embarrassment if they didn't study, if they, to feel the consequences.
Yeah. For them to feel it rather than to get in the way of those consequences.
Right.
Right. I don't, for my son, it's like, I don't want to put myself in between him and that. It's like, oh, well, it looks like that sucks for you.
Yeah.
I like any way I can help, because it looks like you messed that one up a little bit. I'm here for you. Yeah. I'm on your team. Right. But listen, I can't shoot the goal. And if you get smacked in the face, that's sorry, bud. Right. Like, it sucks to suck, Yeah. It's like, but so I see a lot of that. And, with you, has that changed or evolved? Like, because I know you were in the home improvement sales for a good long time, and then you transitioned over to financial services, starting off as an independent agent, creating your own agency and brokerage, and now you have an awesome group that you work together with. How did you find, like, not only in sales, but in like the way you were able to show up at home? How did that change as you made that transition?
I started noticing, early on here, if you put in the work, if you put in the sacrifice, you can get more time a lot faster. And so there's a trade-off. So it's putting in the time of 6-7 days, weeks for about 3.5 years. And we heard that all the time here in the early days is, give us 5 years of just going full throttle. And when you come out of that, you're going to have so much more time with family. Your lifestyle is going to be completely different. Yeah. And so I trusted the people who were giving me that advice. I trusted Casey, Brandon, Brian, Edward, yourself, Linwood. And I saw what they were doing. I was like, well, again, if they can do it, I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when it came to, like, over these past few years, I mean, you've been able to become very financially successful, not only through, I remember the first month, it was so frustrating to me. I was sitting there, I was like, at that time, I was like trying to get up to like 20 grand in production in a month, get up, have my first like $10,000 to $12,000 in income month. And you come in and you write 120,000, just come in and crush it. And I'm like, damn it, what the hell is going on? like what, how is this even possible that I'm struggling to get to this? And this guy's just out here crushing it. And so not only impacting clients, but then to later on and very quickly finding some of those people who could be your right hand men, right hand women, some of those people that you partnered with, that you really locked arms with. And I know I've been able to watch the climb in your life and watch that continue to get better and, come down to visit you at Ponte Vedra. Talk about that life change since you started in financial services, coming with Symmetry, building your own agency. What does that look like for you and your ability to show up as a dad, as a husband in your family's life?
For me, it was the pressure was greatly reduced. And having the opportunity to focus again a little more on the family, to be around the family, it felt weird. The first time I got out of not having to leave my house and go, help a family, Tuesday being home at 6:30 in the evening, I felt like I was missing something.
Yep.
Listening to Jim Rohn all those years, driving around my little Honda Civic, be present when you're home, be present at home. When you're on the job, be present at the job. And I was struggling with this. This is supposed to feel cool, but I feel like I'm missing something. So it evolved slowly into the family life. I was able to see a lot of sports games. I was there for a lot of the events.
Yep.
And I realized, Michelle's the sheriff. I'm the deputy.
You got to know your role.
Yeah. There comes the discipline and all that stuff. Like, she's really got that good. I like old school hockey player. I'm just like, losing points and stuff. So, we had a good base at home.
Yeah.
And that encouragement. And so, we're just always promoting our children to find their own path. We're here for you. We'll encourage you, but you have that freedom. So it's a lot more time, travel, and giving them some opportunities they're grateful for. Putting our kids through college, paying for it, and giving them some things with a car here or there. My parents gave me a car when I graduated college. They paid for my college education. They were good savers. So I kind of had that, that mindset, the ego, like if they can provide for me for that, I can do that for my kids.
Yep.
Like I don't want to lower the bar.
Yeah.
And so it's been a 50-50 work environment. But if you really look at raising a family, it's been a lot more Michelle because I had to be away.
Yeah.
I had to sell.
Yeah. And speaking of being away, I mean, I look at, there's a few people where I look at their relationships, and we got to be at your house on Mother's Day, and it was we got to be part of Michelle's celebration that day. That was so awesome and funny at the same time, and enjoying Mother's Day breakfast. And Michelle has definitely served that role in my life in a lot of ways. She's like, "Your shirt's not tucked in. You gotta." She's helping to make sure I got my crap together. And so, but for those people who are out there and they're pushing, right? They're trying to create a better life. They don't want to let that bar lower for their family, and they're out there getting after it. How do they? 5 years down the road when they have a good business, how do they still have a good marriage if you had to give somebody advice?
I think it's respect.
Okay.
Respect the fact that, the thing I'm fortunate with is having, matured as a man was I had my woman with me, so she knows all my faults, and the sacrifices, and understanding that if I respect what she's doing, she might not be getting a paycheck per se, but she's handling the kids. That's important.
Yep.
She's encouraging me. She's coming with business ideas like we should buy real estate.
Yeah.
She was, in my ear in the early 2000s saying, we should hang our shingle up and have an insurance agency. Because in 2008, when the things hit the fan, with the economy,
Yep.
we were still paying for homeowners insurance, car insurance, life insurance, health insurance. And so that was a big wake up, like we should start our own insurance agency. And I was like pushed back, like I don't want to tackle friends and family. I don't want, I've been there, done that. That's painful. I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah.
But it's that type of encouragement that's not always seen, but I definitely hear it, and that security to go for it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a powerful thing. And sometimes we unintentionally put that other person in a bad place. I mean, it's like whether it's a stay-at-home mother and it's like, I was out working hard all day. Like I find myself, because my experience is the only one I know, and I'm sitting, my wife, she works from home quite a bit, and it's like, you were home all day. It's like, I'd rather put a gun in my mouth than have those words come out, because it's like, there's no shot that I want to have her feel any other way than like how she feels about what she did. Like, because I want her to be proud of what she did, whatever that looked like. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's not just as vital, just as important. And having, I think that just that fundamental level of respect for each other and being able to communicate through that, and the fundamental level of respect for her to notice, like, he's going to let me know if he killed it today.
Yeah.
He's got, if he killed something, he's bringing it home for us so we can cook it. He's going to let me know.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to say anything, and I'm going to keep him protected because he's keeping us protected.
Yeah.
And that's those strong forces in the relationship, how you've created those so that those go together rather than push apart. Because I think a lot of people will end up embattled for importance in the relationship. And if you're busy telling each other that they're important in the relationship, that can be everything. And
Absolutely.
I think that just watching you guys interact, it's like, it's so real, and because it's so real, it's so good. It's not one of these relationships where it's like you say all the right things to each other, but you never really talk.
Right.
It's one of those things where you have that solid connection. So that
I didn't want to fold laundry.
Yeah.
I mean, with 4 kids, the mountain pile is huge, and she'd be there, 8:15, 8:30 at night when the kids are all in bed. She's folding laundry.
Yeah.
And I didn't want, and I still find myself, still thanking her, like she folds my laundry. I'm like, thanks, babe.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to fold all this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I realized the same thing. I was like, hey, I was in a position where I have to take off work because my son's mom is like, my son's mom at the time, just when he was a baby, she had some things to do. And I'm like, I'm taking care of my son, and we got somewhere to go, and I got to bring him. And I'm like, okay, so that's happening in an hour. So I'll start getting ready in about 15 minutes. We'll leave the house in about a half an hour. 3 hours later, we're leaving the house, and I'm pulling my hair back. She comes back in the door. I'm like, boom, give it to him. I'm out of here. Like, this is not my skill set. Worst fit ever. I resigned from this position. It's not of being a dad, but of being a stay-at-home dad. Right. That is not gonna. God bless you if you can do that as a man. I don't know where you find the patience or the nurturing in yourself. But for me, those were a few moments where I was just like, yeah, I can do this on a part-time basis. I'm good for weekends and evenings.
Right.
During the day, this is not where my skill set lands, and I can bring a whole lot of money into us if I'm allowed to be freed up. But yeah, that mutual respect and appreciation of the talents and skills.
And what came out of that too was by having the time, we're all trying to work hard to earn time. Having that time and that security, she was able to follow her passion and go into real estate.
Yeah.
So she started, buying houses and rental properties for us and our family, which then she had the opportunity to manage those, buy them, negotiate them. And so she felt that value.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of how you start out respecting the relationship, like some days you're going to be on, some days I'm going to be on.
Yeah.
But that environment then can, your partner can pursue other interests because you have that seesaw effect, that teeter effect. Like, yeah, it's okay. If you feel that, you think going into real estate's a good idea, let's check it out.
That the relationship being a foundation for that other person to become better and more of themselves and just figure life out. Because it's not like, especially you guys got married so young, but any of us, it doesn't matter if you get married when you're 18 or when you're 58, you're still figuring your life out, and a marriage being a place where that can happen I think that's an unexplored idea. It's like, well, this person has their stuff together and I have my stuff together. It's like, well, then you don't really need each other, do you? You don't really, there's not a lot to gain because you're two of the same puzzle pieces and you stack, but you don't fit.
Yeah.
And
it's like joint checking account. You're married now. You're a team. Yeah. You're a team. Have that joint checking account. Yeah. Learn about that.
Yep. Yeah. That way they can see every time you go to Chick-fil-A and it's like, yeah, no, I've been eating really healthy. Well, the eight visits in 7 days to Chick-fil-A may say
exactly.
If you could go back and see that young kid who was riding dirt bikes, who was watching the older kids in his neighborhood do it, saying I can do it, was looking out the window in school, going into college, making those connections, watching your education. If you could go back to that younger Kevin, or to that person who's in that experience, who they have the whole world in front of them and they feel like they're being told, well, you got to know what you got to do. And there's a lot of pressure being put on that person without a ton of support. What would you tell that person?
One of the things is don't let your current environment dictate your moves for the next 2-3 years.
Okay.
Things can always turn around, change, with you if you have the right attitude and the right mindset.
Yeah.
Is that curiosity, what's going to bring today? Yeah. What can I do differently? How can I react differently today than I did yesterday? And not feel like somebody's holding you back.
Yeah.
But really, if I had to give myself advice, is be more patient. I was very impatient. I just give it a little time.
Yeah.
Give you a present day example. About 3 months ago, my family is all on this new puzzle game, Wordle.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're doing Wordle.
Yeah.
And I having that like old school closed mindset is like Wordle. Like, oh, just waste my time. Oh, it's fun.
Yep.
It's like, And so I tried Wordle. And I'm like, all right, I got it in 5. And they're like, okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So now I find myself with Wordle, if I have time to just sit there and look at it and think and go slow, I can do it.
Yeah.
It might not always be in 2 or 3, or sometimes it's 5 or 6, but it's having more patience to just sit there and focus on it instead of getting distracted. And I think the person who I was back then and who I'm trying to be better today is having more patience and more focus and not compare. I did a lot of comparing. It's always going to happen.
Yeah.
But really how to tune it out and just focus being who you are and take your time.
I think that's so incredibly valuable because, more time presents more truth, and it's like we have to act, but if you're not in that situation and you have the opportunity to give yourself time to be able to look at the future, to be able to figure it out a little bit more, to not compare yourself and say, oh, I need to speed up and finish the short race, but in finishing the short race, you lose the long one, right? Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. And I think that just this is packed full of lessons. Anybody who just even takes a cursory listen to this, just everything from saying what needs to be said, from setting up the structure and the parameters of it, to being able to having those people to look up to in life, as far as being able to emulate, who are making those connections, to all the parts and pieces of not only sales but family. This incredibly valuable, and really appreciate you taking the time to hang out. any last things you want to promote or push out there to people?
Brian, I appreciate you having us on here. Value your friendship and our relationship all these years.
Yeah.
And, Purdy Financial Group and Symmetry, Quility, along with the Delaney Agency, really excited about our future, how working together and teaming together throughout our whole career here and going forward is really exciting. So I'm excited about all the new opportunities that are coming down the pike for us.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun yesterday, wasn't it?
Sure was.
That was a blast.
Yes.
People were all fired up. I was like, well, that's good. But Kevin and I had a blast doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, teaching in front of people. So awesome. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining our conversations. We're developing this platform for simple, profound tools and techniques that can help you get the best out of your life and, more importantly, unlock potential. You can find me across all social platforms at The Brian Delaney and online. Come visit us at thebriandelaney.com.